Right now, there's several changes happening at the same time in Washington, and if you're not paying attention, you could end up paying more without realizing why. Healthcare costs are shifting, government deadlines are approaching, and spending decisions are overlapping in ways that can help some people, but quietly hurt others. Missing one update could mean higher monthly bills, delayed services, or less financial flexibility than you planned for. If you've been feeling confused or unsure about what actually matters right now, you're not alone. Here's the thing that surprised even me when I started looking into this. Decisions being made in Washington this month can change how much you pay for health insurance, whether certain benefits get delayed, and even how stable things feel in the markets, all within a matter of weeks, not years. And for a lot of people, especially folks living on fixed incomes or tight budgets, that timing really matters. So before we go any further, quick question for you, and I'm genuinely curious. When you hear news about Congress or Washington, do you usually feel concerned, confused, or kind of tuned out? Let me know in the comments. And okay, with that in mind, let's talk through what's actually going on. So Congress came back for 2026, and they didn't exactly come back to a clean slate. They came back to a pile of deadlines all stacked on top of each other. The biggest one, at least in the short term, is the government funding deadline at the end of January. If Congress doesn't act, parts of the government can shut down. And I know some people here shut down and think, yeah, we've been here before. But the reality is, every shutdown creates delays, stress, and real disruptions, especially for people who rely on government services. Now, here's where this ties into your money more directly. At the same time as this funding deadline enhanced health care subsidies that helped millions of Americans afford insurance have expired. These were the subsidies that lowered monthly premiums for people buying insurance through the Affordable Care Act. And once those expired at the end of last year, premiums started going up right away for a lot of people like this month. What's more, roughly 22 million people were benefiting from those lower premiums. And now, without Congress stepping in, many of them are seeing noticeable increases in what they pay each month. For some families, it's not a small bump. It's the difference between keeping coverage or dropping it altogether. And I want to slow down here because this is one of those moments where people think, well, that doesn't apply to me until it suddenly does. Even if you're on Medicare or you have employer coverage, changes like this ripple outward. When millions lose or downgrade coverage, it puts pressure on hospitals, state budgets, and eventually taxes and premiums across the board. So, in the House, something interesting happened. A small group of Republicans from swing districts joined Democrats to force a vote on extending these healthcare subsidies for another 3 years. That doesn't happen often. It's done through something called a discharge petition, which is basically lawmakers going around leadership because they feel the pressure back home. Supporters of the extension say it's about preventing immediate harm. State officials are already warning that tens of thousands of people in some states could lose coverage simply because it's no longer affordable. And yeah, when people lose insurance, they often delay care, which can lead to higher costs later, both for them and for the system. But then we get to the Senate, and this is where things get complicated. Senate Republicans have made it clear they're not on board with a clean extension. Some want tighter eligibility rules, others want additional restrictions added in, and some are perfectly fine letting the subsidies expire altogether. President Trump has openly criticized the program, which adds another layer of uncertainty. So what you have is a situation where the House might pass something, but the Senate could block it or change it in ways that stall everything. And during that delay, people are still paying higher premiums every single month. Now, running alongside all of this is the government funding fight. Congress needs to pass spending bills to keep the government running. So far, they've only completed about half of what's needed for the full year. Leaders are talking about bundling bills together, doing what they call mini-buses just to get things across the finish line. And both parties say they don't want another shutdown. We've all seen how damaging those can be. Federal workers miss paychecks, services slow down, and confidence takes a hit. And confidence matters because when people feel uncertain, they spend less, invest less, and pull back. And speaking of uncertainty, we can't ignore what's happening internationally. The administration recently authorized military action in Venezuela and capture its leader, Nicolas Maduro, without prior approval from Congress. Now, the administration says this was a law enforcement-style operation, not a traditional act of war. But many lawmakers aren't buying that explanation. So why does this matter for your finances? Well, military actions have costs, both immediate and long-term. They affect federal spending priorities, debt levels, and global stability. Markets don't love uncertainty, especially geopolitical uncertainty. Even if you're not watching the stock market every day, things like pension funds, retirement accounts, and even interest rates are influenced by how stable or unstable the world feels. Some senators are now pushing for a vote to limit further military action without congressional approval. That vote might fail, but the fact that it's happening at all tells you there's tension behind the scenes, and tension in Washington often translates into delayed decisions everywhere else. Another thing to consider is how all of this plays into the upcoming midterm elections. Lawmakers, snorts, are very aware of how voters feel about healthcare costs, government shutdowns, and foreign conflicts. If premiums keep rising and Congress looks stuck, voters tend to blame whoever's in power. That political pressure can sometimes push compromise, but can also make people dig in harder. Now, beyond these headline issues, Congress also has a long list of other items they're trying to deal with. Things like energy permitting, cybersecurity funding, artificial intelligence rules, and even proposals to ban members of Congress from trading stocks. Each one of these has financial implications, either from markets, consumer protections, or how tax dollars are spent. And here's the part that often gets missed. When Congress is juggling too many crises at once, smaller but still important issues get pushed aside. That can mean delays and benefit adjustments, slower responses to fraud, or postponed reforms that could save money in the long run. I remember talking to someone a while back who said, "I don't follow politics because it just stresses me out." And I get that. But the truth is, these decisions don't care whether we're watching or not. They still affect rent prices, medical bills, and how far a retirement check goes. So then, what does all of this mean for you, practically speaking? First, if you or someone you care about buys health insurance through the marketplace, it's really important to review your premiums and coverage now. Don't assume it's the same as last year. Even small changes can add up over 12 months. Second, if you rely on any federal services, keep an eye out for delays or changes if funding negotiations drag on. Planning ahead, even a little, can reduce stress if something slows down unexpectedly. And third, from a broader financial perspective, this is a reminder to keep flexibility in your budget when possible. Uncertainty at the federal level tends to show up as price increases or service changes at the personal level. Having even a small buffer can make a big difference. Now, earlier I asked how you usually feel when you hear about Congress. And I just want to say, if this stuff feels overwhelming, you're not alone. A lot of people feel like decisions are being made far away without much input from regular folks. That frustration is real. What I try to focus on is understanding enough to make better personal decisions. You don't have to know every detail of a bill or every political argument. But knowing where pressure points are, healthcare, spending, stability, helps you prepare instead of react. And yeah, what I'll say next might surprise you a bit. Sometimes, even when Congress looks completely stuck, the fear of backlash pushes last-minute deals through. We've seen it before. That doesn't guarantee good policy, but does mean things can change quickly, sometimes overnight. So, if something shifts, like health care subsidies getting extended at the last second or a short-term funding deal being passed, it can have immediate effects. That's why staying lightly informed, not obsessively, just enough, is actually a form of financial self-care. Now, as we keep watching how this plays out, remember the big picture. Healthcare costs, government stability, and global events are all connected to your day-to-day finances more than headlines let on. And while you can't control what Congress does, you can control how prepared you are. If you've been following along and haven't shared your thoughts yet, feel free to join the conversation. It really helps everyone see different perspectives. And so, yeah, moving forward, keep an eye on your expenses. Stay aware of changes that affect you directly, and don't underestimate how quickly policy decisions can show up in your monthly budget. These moments in Washington may feel distant, but their impact is often very close to home.